The year is 1939. Paul Crosley Jr., who was an inventor, industrialist, best known for radio broadcasting and building appliances, and he did own the Cincinnati Reds at a time, would get into the automotive industry building tiny cars. But make no mistake, Crosley cars were not the first tiny cars on the US market. That title goes to the American Austin, unless you count cycle cars as tiny cars. American Austin was followed by American Bantam. Crosley came next. The early Crosley cars would use a Waukesha Model 150 Club Twin. Crosley would use that engine from 1939 through 1942, and it'll be covered, but in a different engine episode. Crosley would replace that engine with a totally different design called the CoBra engine. CoBra stood for copper brazed, aka the Mighty Tin, because this engine was made of stamped steel, originally designed by Lloyd Taylor of Taylor Engines in 1937 in California for the military to use on board PT boats and other applications throughout the military. This engine was made of sheet metal instead of cast iron. The military's primary use of this engine was mostly for a power generator. It's also important to note that when the military used these engines, they considered them just throwaway engines. Once the engine hit a certain number of hours, they would just throw it away. Crosley wanted these engines to last, so the valve train needed to be improved for variable speed. Cylinder walls also had to have a special coating to take more temperature cycles. The CoBra engine was good for about 60,000 miles if maintained proper. The cylinder block and head were built from a number of pressed steel parts that were brazed together as a single unit. Both the intake and exhaust is on the right-hand side of the block. Pistons were aluminum. Single overhead cam driven by two sets of beveled gears and a vertical shaft in the front of the engine block. Because this engine was made of tin, it was super light, weighing 58 pounds, all dressed out with accessories and flywheel, 133 pounds. 44 cubic inch displacement, single overhead cam, inline 4, 0.7 liters. It's good for 26.5 to 27 horsepower at 5,200 RPM, which doesn't sound like a lot, but you gotta remember, this engine only weighs 133 pounds. So the power to weight ratio is pretty impressive. 33 pound-feet of torque, 45 Newton meters at 3,000 RPM with a bore of 2.5 inches and a stroke of 2.25 inches. Compression is 7.5 to 1. 5 main bearings. Years this engine was used, 1946 through 1949, as the Mighty Tin. Despite the engine being an outside-the-box solution to a problem, revolutionary in its own right, it did have its issues. The biggest one being corrosion. The engine's, think about it, the engine's made of steel and it's filled with water. What's going to happen? It's going to rust, and then they started to leak, and they started becoming a problem. And it damaged Crosley's reputation. They got a bad rap because their quality just wasn't there. So in 1949, Crosley would drop the CoBra process, and they would introduce the CiBa process, which was cast iron block assembly. Crosley would make a few improvements over the CoBra engine design, flat top combustion chamber. It's also important to note that they made many different variants of this engine until Crosley stopped making cars in 1952. When Crosley made the switch, anyone with the CoBra engine could get the CiBa engine upgrade for $89 with exchange, which sounds pretty reasonable until you realize that that's equivalent to you spending $1,179.07 in the year 2024. Built out of tried and true cast iron. The cast iron block added 30 pounds to the weight. It did fix all of the water leaks, but the damage to Crosley's reputation in the automotive business was pretty much sealed. Crosley would exit the automotive business in 1952, but it's important to note that the engine did live on in marine applications. Alright, now it's time for Would You Rather. If you had to pick any Crosley made at any point in time, which one would you pick? In the comment section below. On to the second scenario, 1950 Crosley Farmo Road, or 1951 Crosley Super Sport, or 1950 Crosley Pick-em-up Truck. I'm going to leave this here for a minute. If you need more time, feel free to pause the video. Now it's time for Name That Tune. First person to give both the name of the band and the song title correctly in the comment section will have their comment pinned to the top of it. Thank you all so much for coming out and watching this. If you'd like to get in touch with me, shoot me a comment in the comment section below or send me an email at what_its_like@a lost mostly forgotten web provider yahoo.com if interested. Thank you all so much for everything that you bring in the comment section. And until next time, toodaloo! So if you guys are still with me, really cool announcement that I would love to make. We are doing this new segment called Part of the Conversation. It's going to be a live broadcast. Anybody that's watching can chime in and be part of the conversation. The very first one is going to be November 20th. That's Wednesday, November 20th at about 11 o'clock in the morning. It's going to be at the AACA Library out in Hershey, Pennsylvania. It's going to be awesome, and I hope that you guys can attend. So mark your calendars for Wednesday, November 20th at about 11 o'clock a.m. She said goodbye in Marina Del Rey. I had a good time, was the last thing I heard her say as I walked away.